We're talking today with the writing team of Chaturbate, the musical, from our Hollywood Fringe Festival projects. We have Chris Edgar, who wrote the lyrics, Dan Margules, who wrote the book, and David Jayden Anthony, who wrote the music. And I'd like to talk with all of them about the process of putting that show together. For starters, I'd love for you to talk just a moment about your past history with NMI, how long you've been with us, and perhaps what motivated you to decide to take part in the Fringe project. You want to start, Chris?
Sure. Well, I took the core curriculum of NMI in 2015, and I was very happy with the strides I was able to make as far as writing lyrics are concerned based on that program. And I met Dan and did a project with him in that, and wanted to do another show with him. I listened to some of David's work as well, and I think you did the program a while back. And I said, yeah, well, this sounds like another opportunity to work with them would be great. So that's why I joined the Fringe Festival.
Super. Dan, how about you?
And I was in the core program with Chris, and then a year after that I was in the full-length curriculum, which was the reason that I took the core program first, because I knew I had this story that I wanted to turn into a full-length musical, and so I started with the basics through the core program. And then when that was wrapping up, I had another story idea, and it came along just at the same time that you guys offered the Fringe program, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to test it out in a short version.
Yeah, good timing. How about you, David?
I think my core year was 2012, and then I worked and took a hiatus from writing, and I kept running into Scott Guy at various theater events, at the ASCAP workshop and things, and he said, I'm going to call you, there's something coming up. And the short length of the Fringe Festival made it not too daunting, including my busy schedules, and so I committed to 2 shows.
Right, and did you regret that afterwards? I don't mean regret. Of course you loved doing the shows, but I bet it wound up being a bit more work than you had thought, considering the short period of time. But
it was great, though. It was
good.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Okay, well, let's talk for a moment about once you guys did decide to form a team, how you came up with the idea. And Dan, I'd love to start with you, because I think part of the motivation was that the show that you had written in full length was such a lovely, frothy family show, and I think you were longing to move in different directions. Am I right about that?
That's part of it, yeah, absolutely. This 180-degree turn from North Pole High. And it's a world that I kind of wanted to explore for a while, and I was trying to come up with the right story idea for it, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be a movie or a novel or what it was going to be. When I decided to make it a musical, I just kind of had the right structure for it right away.
Great. And how did you pitch it to these guys to get them interested, and what was their response?
They both wanted to work on it immediately. I pitched it to the whole general workshop, and everybody responded enthusiastically to it. I was really surprised about that. Somebody said, I wanted to make sure that my show is on the same program as that.
And Chaturbate is an actual website.
Yes.
And so you had to go through some machinations in order to get the right to call it Chaturbate.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approached them in order to get their permission to actually use that name?
Yeah, it was just a lot of research just to find an actual contact information, because the actual site doesn't say, well, here's where we are if you want to reach us. They're kind of a little more private than that. But once I found the email address of the owner, I was able to contact her directly, and I pitched her on the idea, and I think she responded immediately to the fact that it was portraying them in a positive way. And she did ask to see the script first before she agreed to do anything, and she liked that.
And they are, the people that are at Chaturbate, do they call them sex workers, or is there a different term for it when it's online?
Well, the actual site calls them broadcasters,
I guess.
but I think somebody calls them sex workers. I think it's the IRS or something. I don't know.
All right.
Well, cam girls or cam boys.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, cam girls and cam boys, sure. But it was important to them that you were portraying them in a positive light, and
Yes.
certainly with a lot of humor and a lot of fun, but still embracing it in a positive vein and not trying to put them down for what they do.
That's one of the more interesting aspects of the community itself, is that they call themselves sex positive. That's a whole thing, and where they do have sections for men and couples and transgender, and their whole thing is they don't want to be judgmental. I mean, so they won't be forced to do anything that they don't want to do, but they won't look down on it if you've asked them something that you're not comfortable with. You just don't do that. But hey, that's cool that you're into that, and maybe you can find a room. Maybe I'll help you find a room that does that.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And once you got started on the project, I know as we were developing it, and you were bringing pieces of it into General Workshop, one of the points of discussion was how far do you go physically with the show,
Yeah.
and so that you could still, what kind of a rating was it going to get for people who were going to come and see it, and how far did you really want to go? And so maybe you can talk as a team about how you were thinking about, because right from the beginning, I think you said you didn't want there to be actual nudity,
Yeah.
even though I assume there would be on the Chaturbate site.
Right. As open as I am about writing about this topic, I was a little squeamish when it came to saying, and then I want them to do this crazy thing, and so I actually was looking to you guys for guidance on what's acceptable in that area, and I was also hoping I could just leave it all up to the director, which ultimately that is where, the director and the actors, that is where the comfort level ended up being decided.
The selfie stick idea that Dennis McCourt, our director, had was perfect. And
Right.
when he had called me on the phone to describe it, I was like, yeah, that's great. And he said, you're not seeing how brilliant this is going to be. And then when I saw it, it was perfect because it has a phallic nature in it, but very subdued, and it also does not put someone behind a screen or blocking them in any sort of way.
Right, so you're referring to the way in which the director decided to show the actors in your piece that represented the men who are on the site, who would, of course, normally be masturbating while they're watching this,
and have a computer screen blocking them.
and screen in front of them. So how do you do that theatrically so that you can honor it, but still make it happen in a way that's palatable for your audience? So the director, Dennis McCourt, came up with the idea of having them all have selfie sticks with a phone at the very end of it, so we see them watching on the phone, but we don't see what they're watching, but the phone doesn't block them as much as a screen would.
Correct. It was brilliant.
Yeah, even I also wasn't aware. I didn't see in rehearsals when it came up, but they had some of the guys wearing strange costumes, and that was funny. That was something that I hadn't imagined at all.
Right, and I think it was wonderful how your cast embraced it. There was the one character who actually had a suit on, and then as he was watching, he took that off, and we saw that he was wearing a bra underneath, and he enjoyed it as much as the audience did. I think the fun of that.
Yes, and his accent added to the whole
Because he was
the whole thing.
British. Yes, that's right. So when you were approaching the lyrics, Chris, because Dan was writing a very frank book that was full of sexual innuendo but honest sexuality in a very sort of an innocent but honest way, just being very frank and open. And so you needed to sort of adopt that into your lyrics. So how did you approach that?
I was proud of the way that I handled it because I wanted to do this project without going for any cheap laughs. Like, I didn't want to use profanity or any really sexually explicit language, but still managed to gross people out. Still managed to shock people a little bit. And I think I was able to achieve that, so I was happy about that.
I think you did, and I think your performers, again, really enjoyed it, as did your audience. And David, how does that, we might not think immediately how that might translate to music, but when you were figuring out how to musicalize this story, how did all of that play into what you were trying to do musically?
Well, first of all, the lyrics were tight. The craft was so great that it was easy to jump right in and start playing, I knew I wanted contemporary sound, as best I could with just piano. And so there are not shows like ours out there to borrow from, but any of the up-tempo pop and rock-based shows that have a little bit of edge, I wanted to give them. Everything except for the ballad, I think, had a good driving force behind it.
Fantastic. And I know that as we went into rehearsals, one of the things that, and you might have had to think about this before rehearsals, but one of the questions was that the participants, the ones who are watching online, are supposed to tip the person on the Chaturbate site, the cam girl. And there was a lot of discussion about how was that, in the script it just said tip, or something
Right.
like that. And so there was a question about how is that going to happen. So how did you all interface with Dennis about the decisions that were made about how that got portrayed
Well,
in
initially, I tried like heck to incorporate a musical lick to represent it, and every single thing seemed cheesy and in the way of the music. And so I told them, I said, I can't work it in musically to be clever or cool. It's just not working out, because some of those things just end up sounding so dorky. So I said, we've got to do a bell or a sound effect or something like that.
Right, and so was it Dennis who came up with the idea
Well,
for?
So then after he wasn't able to come up with the musical motif that we were looking for, I went back to the book just before we turned in the final draft, and I just added in the moderator hits a bell. I think one of the 4 characters was supposed to be the room moderator, and he would have been hitting the bell every time.
I see.
And once we got that into rehearsals, Dennis first felt, well, let's have all 4 of them get to do something, or at least 3 of them, because
The other
one of them doesn't tip.
Right. He's a gray. He doesn't
right.
tip. Yes.
But he thought it would be more fun and more active for all 3 participants to have a bell. And then beyond that, it just became, well, what if they each had a different sound? I wasn't crazy about that idea.
That someone had like a
horn.
a horn, and
Yeah.
someone had like jingle bells.
Right.
Would you have been happier if they'd all had the same sound? Is that what you were imagining?
Yeah,
I think dramatically it works with the different sounds. However, they would all have the same sound on the internet.
Yes.
Realistically,
So,
they
realistically, it would be all the
That's
same
true, that's
chime
true.
or ding or whatever.
would.
So
Right.
I'm going for realism.
Exactly. But it was fun. I agree with you from an audience perspective that when they all started tipping at once, it was pretty funny to hear all those different sounds.
I agree.
It was very enjoyable. Once it went into rehearsal and you got to see it come alive with your actors and head towards the show, we ran into the issue and yours was not the only show that had this issue, that we were running short of time, running long on time, and we had such specific time slots that we had to fit into, and each program of 3 shows had to come in at 60 minutes. And so all of the shows, I would say all 12 of the shows, had to do a certain amount of trimming and cutting in order to get them tight enough. And I think both of the shows you were involved with, David, that had to happen. So with this show, we were the other 2 shows in the evening had already done as much cutting as they could, we felt, and we were still running consistently almost 5 minutes long for the overall program. And so there was a point at which, when we were trying to figure out what to do, and I will take full responsibility for this, that as a dramaturg, I made the suggestion to the director that we either cut or severely truncate your lead actress's ballad. Because I personally felt, as much as I loved the song, and believe me, I did, I felt like that once she had the monologue prior to the song sort of told us what we needed to know, and the first little bit of the song actually gave us all the information we needed. So although the song was beautiful and there was a lot more in it, it was really spinning on in the same arena. And so I felt like the quickest way for us to gain 4 or 5 minutes and make those shows all fit was to make that cut. We contacted you guys and asked your opinion, and it took you a while to get back to us because I imagine there were some serious conversations going on. And I know that the ultimate decision was to go along with it. I'm sure that a lot of that was simply because something, it had sort of had to be done. And I get that you might have felt under the gun on that. But I want you to feel free in this moment to talk about what your conversation was about how you felt about that, and be perfectly honest about how you felt in terms of the cut happening and how it affected the show.
Well, I think initially I was thinking, well, there are some really good jokes that you see in the in the next A section and then in the B section. But in fact, I think that it was for the best, because, like you said, particularly in the context of a 15-minute show, we want the plot to develop as quickly as possible, and we were kind of spinning on the same theme, like you said. So ultimately, I agree with the decision.
Painful, but
Well,
okay.
when it came close to the end, I had 2 sets of lyrics left to set. And when I sat down to do the second to last one, the penultimate set of lyrics, I thought, well, I haven't added up the times for all the songs. And so I went back through in Sibelius and I went, oh, there's 20 minutes of music at this point. So
for a 15-minute show.
Right, so I
I think you came in probably ultimately about 18. A lot
yeah,
of the
we're
shows
closer
did.
to 20.
Yeah.
So I sent them a very urgent email that was like, wait, we've got to talk and reassess where we stand.
We cut a few verses from some of the other songs as well.
Yeah, we had to before I sit down to write these things. But
And then I did a timing of myself reading all the dialogue that wasn't part of the songs, and it was only 4.5 minutes of dialogue.
Right.
So yeah,
I was really surprised.
So it was music heavy, which
Yeah.
I don't mind. When it came to the ballad, my initial thing was the only reason I didn't want to trim part of it was because it offset all of the other high energy numbers. This is the one ballad in the thing, and she is the lead in the thing. So I think that was the only hesitation. It didn't take me long to realize dramatically this is the least important thing. right? So I after thinking about it for a second, I said, if this isn't pushing the story along as much as the other tunes, then it's got to go.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you in terms of she's the lead character and it's her ballad moment. I'd like to think that that the little bit of it we left in allowed us to have, and because it's such a short show, that was enough to give us at least some of that change of mood that you were interested in and sort of settle us into the sadness of that moment or the bittersweetness of that moment. And one of the things I considered when I was racking my brain dramaturgically, trying to think, what can I do fast? Because if we'd had more time, we could have been much more surgical about how
Yeah,
can we
we
do
could
it.
have trimmed
But we
little
didn't.
pieces.
But that would have been hard for the actors at that point to take a line here and a this here and a that there.
No, it was
It would have
perfect,
been
yeah.
devastating. So I was trying to think, what can we do quickly that will get us what we need? And it was definitely one of my considerations that although she is the lead, she had lots of other songs.
Yeah.
I would definitely have hesitated if that was her only big musical moment. I would have thought, I can't do that to the lead. But she had a lot of other musical moments. So I thought, because I also considered how's she going to feel when we tell her we're cutting, or
Right.
mostly cutting her ballad.
Right.
But I was hoping that she'd be okay with it just because she's got a lot of other singing to do.
Right.
And it certainly was never a choice about the song or the performance. It was simply about the clock.
Yeah, I mean, that was my favorite of all the songs that have been written for the books that I've written in NMI. That was my favorite one, and I tried to
Thank
protect
you.
it. I started going through and finding lines of dialogue that I was willing to sacrifice, and it was for all the reasons that you just mentioned. That
If we had done it a week earlier, and I can fault myself for that too. If we'd seen it coming a week earlier, we could have made those kinds of surgical cuts. But it was too late for the actors to do that.
Yeah. No, it was great.
Yeah,
It was great.
well, good. So overall, talk a little bit about what it felt like to finally get your show up there and in front of your audiences, which wound up being sold out and crazy, wild, screaming audiences by the end.
It was.
And whether
Even at the 11 o'clock show.
Oh yeah, that final performance was
Final was
insane.
great,
It was
yeah.
really fun. So a little about how that felt and what might be next, either for this show or for you guys as a team or separately. You want to start, Chris?
Sure. I mean, of course, it always gives you a new perspective on a show to see it performed live. I mean, particularly in terms of the lyrics, because there are some jokes that seem really surefire, and then they didn't get any laughs at all. The thing about defying gravity, for instance, I thought that would get a big laugh, and then I don't think that was basically crickets. And then the joke about I'm a barrel of can't say no, the audience seemed to get that. And I thought that would be too much of an archaic, show reference in order to get a laugh.
I thought the same thing as you, actually.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And of course I have all these things that I want to tweak. So I want to get another opportunity to do the show and hopefully a longer version of
I
it.
want to say, Chris, just in your defense, that you had so many funny references to musicals that if any of them fell, it was because there were so many people
Yeah.
were trying to keep up.
Yeah.
In a good way, I mean.
Yeah.
So okay, well we'll talk. Let's talk about responses, and then we'll go back and talk about the future. So
Yeah, it was very interesting to see the different responses of the different audiences. I totally understand why they do out-of-town tryouts. You really have to see it with an audience. I mean, just even doing rehearsals alone isn't enough. You have to see how different audiences are going to react to it. And then ideally you'd have time to then go tweak it and then play it again.
Yes.
and improve it. But
I had previously written really sweet things as well. So one of the reasons I jumped on this was because I went into Fringe going, this is my chance to do something totally out of the box. And it was interesting to have to call my mom and say, this isn't like the other things you've seen that I have done. And if it's too much, just cover your ears.
and how did she enjoy it?
It was fine.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
she got it. She thought it was hilarious. She thought everything was well done, and she laughed a lot. I could hear in that house everybody's individual laugh.
Right. Well, and to go back to the, originally having to contact the Chaturbate folks, they sent somebody to see it, didn't they? And
Yes.
Two sets of people.
Two
Yeah.
sets of people.
What was the response there?
oh, they loved it, and they want to talk to us again about doing some more stuff. Maybe we're not really sure yet what we're going to do with it, but
Wonderful.
hopefully we will have a chance to put the song back in, do the other two
Totally.
songs that we didn't get
Sure,
to.
do a longer
you know?
version. Are you thinking about that there might be a future for the piece?
What we're putting out there into the universe is that they want to do it at all of the conferences around the country, so that maybe
That
we
would
could
be
expand
nice.
it to a 45.
So the Cam World conferences?
Yeah.
Or
Oh,
adult
there.
business generally, we're okay with that.
Oh.
Yeah, anything in there. There's a
Foreign
lot
conferences.
of those during the year, like weekly.
And do you think they would push you to make it even more
Definitely. We're
over the
just-
top?
Maybe.
Definitely.
And they might have the actors who'd be willing to do that as well?
Yeah.
Because that's always an issue, is
Yeah.
from the casting point of view. People have to feel comfortable with it, or it's going to be antithetical to what you're trying to do, to be non-judgmental. The actors have to be non-judgmental as well, and
Right.
really embrace what
Yeah.
they're doing. So.
Well, and I think, again, our director, Dennis, sort of shifted the essence of that character a little bit around the actress to make it so beautiful, you know, and comfortable. And he did a great job softening and bringing out the innocence in it so that she could nail it.
Absolutely. I think your director did an amazing job, your cast did, and you guys did a great job writing the show. And I really look forward to whatever might come of it in the future, or this team in other projects. So obviously we want you to stay in touch with us and let us know what's next, and we'll help out in any way that we can. And I want to thank you all really for coming and chatting with us about the process and everything. And I appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.